Hi everybody, I'm Angelia. Welcome back to Read and Reread. Today I'm going to do the May wrap-up. And what a month it was. There was some epic reading in this month, so I'm excited to share it with you. I'm going to start right away because there's quite a few and I don't want the video to get too long. But the first one was actually, I think I might have read it right at the end of April, but it didn't make it into my April video. And I did want to mention it because I really enjoyed it. It's called Under the Harrow by Flynn Barry. This was a murder mystery. It was I got this book at the library book sale, and I don't know why they, I guess it didn't circulate well, but I certainly got my dollar's worth out of it. And I don't pay a lot of attention or put a lot of stock in author blurbs on other authors' books because I feel like they're kind of having a friends party and, you know, it's kind of say nice things to about each other's book. But there was a good one on the front of this book. It says, once I started reading Under the Harrow, I couldn't stop. It's like Broadchurch written by Elena Ferrante. And that was Claire Massoud's remark. And I was like, Broadchurch written by Elena Ferrante, that's okay. I can accept that mashup. That sounds pretty intriguing. In this book, Nora and Rachel are sisters. Nora lives in London. Rachel lives in a little Broadchurchy kind of village in England, and frequently on the weekends Nora will take the train to her sister's house and spend the weekend, and they have a little series of sister things they like to do at a pub they go to and stuff like that. They thrift shop and things kind of like this. So it sounds pretty good, but then one weekend Nora goes to Rachel's home, and when she gets there, Rachel has been murdered. She walks into a terrible murder scene, and so the story begins. So in this story, this is one of the ones where the non-police or non-detective person in the story decides to investigate things on their own. The reason why Nora does not trust the police to do a good investigation is based on a traumatic event in the women's past with an unsatisfying response from the police. So I don't want to spoil, give more, but it plays a big part in this story. And Nora is trying to sort through these things. She's finding out some things that Rachel did not share with her. She's revisiting some memories and maybe thinking of some things that she might not have even shared with herself. And so she's kind of reconciling her loss of her sister, past events, the current situation, and she's hampered in her investigating by her own grief. You know, every now and then she just kind of has a meltdown or falls apart. So it's, as you can ascertain, it's not a light and happy book, but if you do like a murder mystery and you like that Broadchurch Shetland kind of vibe, then check out Under the Harrow. Then we move into the classics territory. The next one I read was Jane Eyre, and I'll keep my remarks brief because many of us have read this, and it is, of course, a beloved classic. It's one of my favorites, and it's one of those books where every time I read it, something else kind of stands out to me or comes to the surface. And I would say in this go-around, I get all the things I got before, but a couple of things that I thought about a lot, and maybe I have said this before, but I think I really will make a separate with spoilers video so I can talk more freely about Jane. But I really loved her independence and her striving towards independence and equality in this book. She doesn't totally achieve everything in that regard, but from the time that she is a rather fiery little child, she is fiercely individual, not interested in a lot of the expectations. Like, she's very aware of how women should behave and how to get from point A to point B appropriately, but she's not really buying into all of that. So she knows how to play the game, but she wants the game to change, and that's something I love about Jane. Also found interesting in this book, I noticed for the first time that she multiple times throughout the story relies on her credentials as a teacher to survive and to get by and move her own personal story forward. And as a retired educator, that was very interesting to me. And some of the comments that she makes about teaching and her students. So if I make my separate video, I will talk about that a little further. But yes, it has all the melodrama and the crazy stuff that occurs in Jane Eyre, but I already knew that was coming, and so I focused on some other things, and I enjoyed that a lot. Now, I'm going to mention a book that I didn't totally love, but I did read this month, and I got it from the library, so I'll put a picture up here or here. That was The Maid by Nita Prose. That's a current, recent release that a lot of people were talking about. Some of my friends said they liked it, and I came upon it at the library, so I checked it out. It was also a mystery, and I did not, as I said, I did not love this book. For me, the mystery itself was kind of far-fetched, and it was kind of in the category of cozy mystery, which isn't really my preferred genre. I like a more gritty, dirty kind of mystery. This one was a little too packaged for me. Also, the character Molly, I really wanted to like her as she's a young maid, works at a hotel, and that's really all she does. She has been raised by a grandmother. She's on the autism spectrum. She's really into her routine. She takes immense pride in her work. These aspects I enjoyed, but her character, she, at one point in the story, she talks about that her grandmother tried to teach her to know when somebody's laughing at her or with her, but the author herself, a couple of times in the story, sets it up where the reader would be laughing at Molly instead of with her because Molly is misinterpreting an exchange or a situation, and I didn't really like that. I felt like her abilities to navigate things socially were inconsistent in the story. She's very, very literal and concrete at certain times, and then at other times she's capable of deceit or hiding information, and I didn't feel like that hung together very well. So that one was kind of a miss for me, but some people have enjoyed it a lot, so take it as you will. Then I got blown away for about a week of my life by reading The Love Songs of W.E.B. Dubois by Honoree Fannon Jeffers. This was a book that seemed to come up on numerous top 10 lists from last year, was up for an assortment of prizes that it mostly did not win. Somehow it kind of missed through the web of some of the major prizes, but it is an amazing American novel. This is the story of Eyre Garfield, a young woman who grows up in the 70s, 80s, 90s. She goes, in the storyline, we go from when she's very young to when she's in her 30s. And she is the youngest of three sisters. Her parents are a doctor and a school teacher. They are a black family that lives in an unnamed northern city, but who have family in Georgia, in a small town. That's her mother's family, and they frequently go back for summers and vacations and things. And so there's several strands in this story where we have Eyre going from childhood forward through college, graduate school, family events. Then we go back in time through the strands of her family history, all the way back. And so we get the stories of all kinds of fascinating people from hundreds of years ago up to the current times. And the story starts at the kind of the intersection of indigenous people in America and the earliest slaves that were brought over and the white people who came in, and how these people mingled and made families and children and kind of went forward from there. So we have, it ranges over a lot of different people, and luckily there's a family tree in the beginning so that you can remember some of the different things, because there's people in the story who know their own heritage. There's people in the story who don't fully know their heritage and their different racial strands of their families. There's people that know and pretend that they're somebody that they're not. So we get the backstories of all of these different parts of her family, and as she moves forward in time, it's also a coming of age story about just becoming a woman, becoming more of a feminist, going through college, high school, and all kinds of mostly crappy boyfriends, and she kind of forms her own identity of what she wants in life and what she wants in a partner. Then she herself becomes an active researcher of the family past that we've been reading about all along. And never have I ever been so excited to hear about a fictional person who's not even real changing their major as I was in this book. But I won't get too much into its plot spoilers. One caveat that I would say, it's not a weakness in the book at all, but just a warning for readers, is that part of the story has to do with the legacy of sexual violence and abuse and how it impacts families and generations. And it exists in the backstory of her family, and it exists in the current story of her family. So if that is something that this is not a good time for you to read about, it is pretty important in the story, and you might want to save the book for another time. But it is just a remarkable family saga of a black family in America, and I loved the love stories of W.E.B. Dubois. Then I read a book that was small but had a lot going on, and that was Joan Is Okay by Wang. Now this author came to my attention a couple of years ago because she wrote a book called Chemistry, which I have not read, but I saw it recommended. I had it on my list to read, never got to it. And then when I was at the library recently, I saw her new book, Joan Is Okay, and it triggered my memory. So I thought, well, I'll pick this up, see what I think, and then if I really like it, I'll circle back and see if they have chemistry. So I did read it, and I really did enjoy it. And it was such a different book, like coming from that long, hundreds of years of the family, and then this short, tight time frame of this book, and how many themes were sort of layered into a very compact story. And this is about Joan, who is a doctor in New York City. She has Chinese immigrant parents. She was born here in the U.S., but her brother was not. And Joan really is okay at the beginning of the book, but everybody thinks that there's something that they need to help fix about Joan. Her brother thinks that she needs to get married and have children. Her neighbor sees her inside of her apartment and asks her if she's been robbed because there's hardly anything in there. He can't believe she doesn't have a television, that she's never seen Seinfeld. People at work, that's where she feels the most comfortable. She has arguments with a coworker who is into setting boundaries, like I'm here at work and then I'm out, and these are my hours and I'm not gonna, but she signs on for every extra shift. She wants to be there all the time. She's curiously obsessed with the ECMO machine. She's just really, really an interesting voice. And the one person who kind of got Joan and didn't think there was something off about her or something that she ought to be doing differently was her father. But when she went to college, she was, as the younger child, they had their kids off in college. Joan's parents went back to China and retired. Well, they didn't exactly retire. Her dad found a new line of business. But they'd always had struggled in America. They were not a wealthy family at all. And so they went back to China, and near the beginning of the book, he abruptly passes away, and she goes home for just one short weekend for the funeral. And that's another thing. People are like, well, Joan, you need to take time off. You need to do this. You need to do that. And that's not how Joan operates. But there is the grief that she's working throughout this book, and how much she misses her dad without really stopping and letting it all kind of come in on her. So Joan is sad, Joan is angry, but you never see that a lot on the surface. But in the narration of the book, you pick it up along the way, and it has a lot to do with societal expectations of how people should behave in certain situations, expectations of women, of Asian people, of things you should do when you reach a certain age, things you should do at work, what you should do for your free time, what you should do for fun. Joan is not interested in other people's expectations. So I found that it at times is funny, at times made me angry along with Joan. And anyway, I really liked it, and I will circle back and find chemistry. All right, then, the last one, and certainly not the least by any measure, was Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. This book, I remember seeing this book last year when it came out, and I saw it, I looked at it, I think it has a terrible cover that didn't interest me in any way, and then I kind of looked at it, and I'm like, it's about aviation and some pilot back in the 30s or whatever, like, it sounds boring. And then I started hearing about how great it was, and it was winning this or on the list for that. And so I looked through again, and I started hearing about how remarkable it was. Then I couldn't get my hands on it anymore. It's always out at the library. I didn't even see it at the bookstore. It got away from me. So finally I managed to get my hands on it again, and it was so good. I just cannot believe the jackpot of big book goodness that I have hit this month. But this is the story of Marion and Jamie Graves, who are twins who survive a shipwreck in 1914, a Titanic-like shipwreck, but it wasn't the Titanic. And their father was disgraced because he was the ship captain, and he grabbed them and jumped in a lifeboat rather than staying with his ship. So they go to live with their uncle. Their dad he goes to jail, and he's mostly out of the picture, but always a questionable figure in their life. And when they grow up, Marion, by chance, becomes mesmerized with the thought of flying. At one time, a plane flies right over her when she's laying out in a field on her horse, and she just gets this bug that she wants to be a pilot. And it goes through Marion's life and how she does become a pilot, which brings her into a very hazardous relationship with a bootlegger. And it's also about her brother and his path, and he becomes an artist like the uncle. It's about her friends and lovers along the way, men and women. It's about a corresponding story in the current time where a movie is being made about Marion based on her journals, an old biography, and a newer historical fiction novel that takes some liberties in imagining her life and her relationships. The current day story was not as compelling to me as the one in the past, but it did grow on me, especially as Hadley, the actress who is trying to redeem herself from a scandal and take on this more challenging role of Marion, becomes interested and finds out some things about Marion that aren't known to everyone else. And it is kind of interesting. There's a lot in here about what you know and don't know about someone, because they have to piece together her life from some letters and journals and memories that other people had recorded, but nobody knows the whole story. And we can think that about anybody. The person who wrote the bestseller about Marion, someone in the story at one point says, every time she hears about two people were in the same place for a while, she imagines that they were lovers. But, her imagination didn't extend far enough, because she kind of missed out on who really were the lovers in Marian's story. And there's just a bunch of really great characters that are developed and kind of nurtured over a long period of time by this author to let you bond with them and really care about what happens to them. I think that's why the longer historical story is more compelling than the current story, which only goes through a short period of time, so you don't really get as attached to Hadley as you do about the people Marian and her brother and Caleb. And just read it, okay, because you will not regret it. All right, that is it on the books that I finished. The one I'm reading right now is I always get tongue-tied on this, The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd, but I'm halfway through, so I'm going to save my remarks for next month because I don't know what I want to say about it yet. But that's where I'm at. My next video will probably be a June TBR, kind of working on my ideas for that, but I'll have it ready pretty soon. I hope that you are having a wonderful weekend, and please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content and not miss anything. And that's it for now. May was an excellent reading month. I hope yours was too. Bye-bye.